this talk, I've titled it Get Ready for Jakarta EE 10. So let's see if I can get my clicker to work here. There we go. So my name is Ivar Grimstad. I'm a Jakarta EE developer advocate at Eclipse Foundation. I am also a member of the Java Community Process Executive Committee, where I represent the Eclipse Foundation. And I'm also actually a committer at Apache, and I run a Java user group in Sweden. These are my Twitter and LinkedIn, so feel free to follow me there if you want to stay updated on Jakarta EE. So when we talk about Jakarta EE, we talk about specifications. And specifications, in our context, we're defining it as some sort of document or description of some area. There's usually an API artifact, like a jar you can download from Maven Central or something. There's a TCK, or a test compatibility kit, which is something we use to verify that an implementation implements the specification and fulfills all the requirements. And that is what we call the compatible implementations, are the ones that are implementing a specification and passing the TCK. And when we have a compatible implementation, at least one open source implementation, we can ratify it as a final specification. So these are kind of the artifacts we're talking about when we're talking about specifications. And Jakarta EE 10 is coming. It's coming in Q2. We had it planned for end of June. It looks like it's going to slip a little bit into July, so technically it would be Q3, but it will be around there, end of June, beginning of July. And Jakarta EE 10 is a lot of new stuff. So if you know Jakarta EE 9 from before, in Jakarta EE 10, all the blue ones here are the specifications that are changed between 9 and 10. So you can see most of them have changes. And the ones with a .0 after the specification name, version number, are major updates. So these major updates could be potentially backwards incompatible changes, or they could be just marketing as we're doing some huge stuff. So it's sort of semantic versioning, but it could be they want to say, hey, we've done some new things here. The gray ones are not updated. They are fairly stable as they are. And there's one new specification in the bottom, CDI Lite, which I'll get into details a little bit later. So I gray out a couple of them on the left side here. And those are the ones that are targeting more sort of enterprise-y features. And then we're left with a set of specifications, which is the Jakarta EE 10 web profile. And web profile has been with us since Java EE 6, so it's nothing new. But as you can see, it gets a major update here with all the blue boxes. And there's one new specification here that wasn't a part of web profile before. And that is concurrency. So concurrency is now a part of web profile. And that is new for EE 10. If I gray out the specifications that are more on the traditional web applications for web UIs and that kind of stuff, we're left with a stack of specifications that are suited for creating microservices or headless services. And this is the brand new Jakarta EE 10 core profile. And this is a new profile we're introducing in 10. And I'll talk about core profile a little later. With Jakarta EE 10, we're raising the Java levels. So the API sources are compiled to Java SE 11. That means you need to run at least Java SE 11 in order to run Jakarta EE 10. It also enables the APIs to use all the features up until Java SE 11 in their APIs. However, we make the TCK able to run with Java SE 11 and 17. So that means that you, as app developers, you can use Java SE 17 with Jakarta EE 10 as long as your runtime has been tested for it. So we're not limiting you to stay on 11 just because we compile the APIs to 11. It's just that we don't want to force everybody to move past 11 just yet. But you can use 17 if you like. And the key here is with testing with 11 and 17. The stuff in between 11 and 17, if somebody wants to certify a runtime with it, fine. We're open for it. You can go ahead and do it. We're testing for 11 and 17. That's what we verify everything works with. So let's go through a couple of these specifications. I'm not going through all of them. But let's pick a couple here and go through them, and maybe show a demo or two as well. So Jakarta Security 3.0 are adding features to the specification. It's a fairly new specification. It came in Java EE 8. So this is kind of the first time they're adding features, because version 1.0 was in Java EE 8. 2.0 was in Jakarta EE 9, which was just a namespace change. So now they're adding features and evolving the API a little bit. And the biggest feature they're adding is support for OpenID Connect as an authentication mechanism. So that is now available in a standard way, in portable across implementations. And in order to do this, they also did other updates to the lower level SPIs or APIs, such as authorization and authentication. And this is kind of to enable us to deliver OpenID Connect. And it's also a foundation for future work. So Jakarta Security is one of the most lively specifications. It's moving forward, and we expect to see a lot of things happening there. I'm also going to peek into persistence. So Jakarta persistence is a minor update, so it's not backwards incompatible. They're adding features and evolving the API here as well. And you may notice the URL structure here, Jakarta EE /specifications, and then / some short name of the specification. That's where you find the stuff. So Jakarta EE /specifications, that's where you find all the specifications. And if you happen to know the short name, you can just type it in the URL, like persistence, and there you can find all the versions of Jakarta EE persistence. So it would be 3.1 after this URL, and then you go directly into Jakarta EE persistence 3.1. So this is fairly easy to find. Persistence is adding UID as basic Java type support. So you can now use UIDs in your persistence entities, just as you would do with a string or an integer. And in this case, I'm using it as a primary key. You can do that, of course. Not necessarily a good idea or a bad idea, I don't know, it's up to you. But you can use it in any of the fields in your class. But you don't have to do this generation back and forth yourself anymore. And this is portable. It has been available in some of the implementations before, but now it's standard. It doesn't matter whether you're using Hibernate or persistence or something else. So let's look at REST Pool of Services. This is part of the core profile. And they're also doing a minor release. They were planning a 4.0, which would backwards incompatible changes and adding more CDI support. But they want to focus on maintaining compatibility here. And one of the things they're adding is something people have been requesting for a lot of time, is multi-port form data support. So now we can upload files through the REST APIs in a standard way. You could do it in REST-easy before, but now you can do it standard and move through across implementations. Another feature they're adding is a Java SE Bootstrap API. So now you can start and run your Jakarta REST application without an application server. And this could be a good idea or a bad idea, but for some application, it certainly makes sense. And I actually want to demo this one. So let's go and look at how this looks in code. So I have this application here. It's called Bootyduk. It's very simple application. It's just just a simple REST, has a getter, and it returns a JSON string here just saying, hey, how did Jakarta EE? So the way I've set it up is, first of all, it's a jar. So it's not a war as you would expect with the Jakarta EE application usually. I'm just using the assembly plugin here to create a runnable jar. And rather than having the Jakarta EE dependencies, I have the Jakarta REST 3.1. And I'm also, I have to choose an implementation. In this case, I'm choosing REST-easy, and I have to have REST-easy core, and then the web server, and also some JSON binding for my JSON support. And if I were doing Jersey here, I would just use the equivalent dependencies for Jersey. So let's look at how to do this. So as a standard REST application, I have this. This is my configuration class, and that's all there is about it. So if I wanted to do the SE bootstrap here, the first thing I would have to do is to create a main method. And when I have a main method, I could do it in this class, or I can do it in a different class, but it makes sense to do it here. When I have my main method, I first have to set up some configuration. So I'll set up my SE bootstrap configuration. And I set the root path, the port, and that's about it. I can do the other things as well, but this is kind of the minimum thing that you usually do. Once I've set up the configuration, I want to kind of instantiate my application. So I create the application, and I just instantiate myself. So it's the complete Duke application that I'm instantiating here. And when I've done that, I just want to start it. And have it running until I want to close it. So I do start it here. I call the static method on SE Bootstrap called start. I pass in the app and the config, which I've defined here. And then I'll just run until I press Control-Z. And I also have to add a interrupt exception since I'm doing the current thread here. So that's about it. I configure my application, I instantiate it, and I start it. So let's see if this runs. Let's see. Oh, sorry. So I'm in the Duke. I'll just first compile it. Since everything here isn't necessarily released yet. I think it is, but I'm using the stage repository just to be sure. Oh, sorry. Did I write something wrong? Sorry? Oh, there we go. It's good to compile it. So there we go. So it compiles, and then I can run the jar file, which is in the target folder. It's called WeAreDevelopers with dependencies. It's up and running on port 8081. 81 WeAreDevelopers hello, and you can see it returns everything. So it's fairly easy, simple to set up a Jakarta REST application and run it like this. So this was the application. I just have the simple REST, and I'm using JSON binding to produce a JSON. So let's look at the core profile. And the key thing with core profile is to target smaller runtimes. And the set of specifications, as we went through, are specifically targeting microservices. So we have for RESTful web services, you have the JSON specifications. Then you have some binding stuff in the middle, like annotations and common interceptors, that kind of stuff. And then it's CDI Lite. And with the core profile, targeting smaller runtimes, what we're meaning is runtimes like Helidon, Quarkus, Micronaut, etc. So these are not necessarily going to be core profile compatible, but I'm guessing they will be sooner or later. Helidon and Quarkus has said that they will do it maybe later this year, maybe next year. So these are potentially Jakarta EE core profile compatible implementations. And the key element of core profile is, as I said, CDI Lite. And CDI Lite is a version of CDI or a subset of CDI that is designed to work in more restricted environments. And with the restricted environments, we're meaning we want to do the dynamic things that CDI does best at runtime. We want to do that at build time. And in order to do all the dynamics, such as extensions that are usually discovered when you start up the application, to do it at build time, we need to introduce a new extensions API. So the previous, or the old that still works, the portable extensions, are now also sort of duplicated by a new extensions API called build compatible extensions, which are resolved at build times, which means that you can compile everything using GraalVM to native code if you want to. So you don't have to, but you can. Another change, which is breaking change backwards, also to make this possible, is that we change the behavior of beans XML. So if you rely on having a empty beans XML, meaning that everything is injectable, now you may have to add a beans XML and define it as all, because the default is now annotated, which is something that makes sense and probably should have been that from the beginning, but now it's actually there. They're also removing some old stuff, but the important thing is the new extensions API, so we can resolve dynamic things at build time. And I'm going to do a demo here. And I'm going to do a larger demo. And I usually do a demo where I take a Jakarta EE application and move it over to Jakarta EE9, and then move it to 10. So what I'm going to do now is very quickly just show how to do it from 8 to 9. And then we dive into 10 and look at some features there as well. And from 8 to 9, of course, it's the JavaX to Jakarta namespace. And why should I care about the JavaX namespace? Well, if you're using Spring, or if you're using Jetty, or using Tomcat, or using Hibernate, or anything else out there, more or less, if you're using something that is associated with enterprise technologies, you're probably affected by this namespace change, because everything is moving from the JavaX to the Jakarta namespace, so you probably have to do something in your code anyway. Spring Framework 6 and Spring Boot 3, coming out later this year, will be supporting the Jakarta namespace from Jakarta EE9. Jetty and Tomcat already does it. And to do this demo, I've created a simple Hello World application. How many architects out there? Yes, so you're probably familiar when somebody asks you to do a Hello World application, you know you can do it in one line saying print Hello World. But of course, we want to have a multi-tiered application with the data store, because we're architects and we architect things. So I have a database with a message. I'm using Jakarta persistence for the retrieval of data. I'm using Jakarta Enterprise Beans as the service layer for business logic. I'm using Jakarta REST and Jakarta JSON binding to produce output. And I'm also have a CDI extension thrown in there just for fun. So this is my Hello World application. I can, of course, do transformation on this one. And transformation means to take the bytecode. I just take the compiled WAR file, run it through Eclipse Transformer or the Apache Tomcat migration tool, that are equivalent, and I have my bytecode translated into Jakarta namespace, and I don't have to do a thing. But that's not very cool. So I can, of course, do the IDE thing, just let the IDE do the stuff for me, and it will just change the namespace and do it automatically. Or I can do it manually. So if you follow these 6 steps, you're fairly safe that you converted your entire application. And it's fairly simple. You update the POM file, you fix the imports. The IDE can do this for you. And then there are some XML schema namespaces. You have some properties files, properties that have been changed. Those that are prefixed with JavaX are now prefixed with Jakarta. Some bootstrap file if you're using extensions. And then maybe you have some concatenation of strings or something that you are concatenating a fully qualified class name with a JavaX namespace or a property or something that you need to change to the Jakarta. So, and all this you can find on this Jakarta EE on GitHub, and do a tutorial and go through it, and it's fairly simple. What I'll do today is I'll do the first 2 steps, and I'll just show you how I've done the others. So the complete Duke application is I'll open it here. It has this Duke's annotation that this Duke's extension looks for and prints something in the system out. There is a a Duke's greeting, which is my database entity. It has a message and an email. I'm using the criteria language from Jakarta Persistence to just select everything. This is called from a enterprise bean, which is my business logic, and here I just find the first one, and if I don't find anything, I'll just write undefined. So it's a very simple business logic, and the resource class uses this service and produces JSON on a GET request. So it's a very simple application. It is currently on Jakarta EE 8, running on Java SE 8. So the first thing I'll change here is actually to add a dependency. I'm not going to update the dependency because I want to make the IDE happy. So I'm going to change this one to 9.1. So I now have both Jakarta EE 8 and Jakarta EE 9. And if you notice here, everything here is on the JavaX namespace. So I'll just refresh my project here. And then I'll go to the refactor menu in the IDE. And I go here, migrate. And it says Java EE to Jakarta EE, which is actually Jakarta EE 8 to Jakarta EE 9. And it says there it will replace everything that is affected. And I'll just do the complete Duke application, and I'll run this refactoring for you. And I'll do the refactoring. And if you look at the code now, you can see it's changed all the imports for me. So that's how simple it is to do this migration. What I'll also do is I'll just to make you sure, I'm not kidding here. I'll drop this into Glassfish 6. There you go. I'll run it here. Just see. Just go and deploy it. And while I'll go through it, I'll show you that the other things that I did update is the XML namespaces. So if you have an old application, you probably have the jcp.org namespace in your XML files. You need to change that to the Jakarta EE namespace. It's the first part of the URL, and it's also HTTPS. So that's what's changed. The other thing is, remember to update the version. And also, you can see here, I've changed the properties from JavaX persistence to Jakarta persistence. So that is also what you need to remember, the XML namespaces and the properties. The other thing, if you're using a CDI extension, you have this bootstrapping file here that is called, in the previous version, it was called JavaX Enterprise Inject SPI extension. Now you just have to rename that file to Jakarta, and you're good to go. So let's look at the application here. And as you see, it says hi there. So the CDI extension is doing its work. If I go to I think it was an 8082. Complete Duke. You see it says how did Jakarta EE do. So it works on the Jakarta namespace. Now let's go and add some Java 17 to this. How many are using 17 or above 11? Yeah, some of you. Okay. So what I want to do, what you see here is I'm using the Duke's greeting, which is my database entity, and expose it through JSON in the API. So what I want to do is I want to have a data object in between there. And the first thing I'm going to do is, first, of course, I can get rid of the Java EE 8. Then let's get rid of Java SE 8 here and refresh it to 17. Then let's add a record. I know it came in 16, but still, if you're jumping from 11 to 17, it will be new in 17. So I'm adding a record. I'm giving this a string message, and I'm using a local date date. So there's my record. That's all I have to do. It generates everything else for me. So getter, setters, and you name it. And what I want to do in my REST API is to return this record. And then I have to also return it from my business logic. And this is where the magic happens. So here I get the Duke's greeting from the database, and I map it to a record. So I'm using the map function here, and take the greeting and create a new Duke's greeting record. I take the greeting message, and I take local date now. And if I don't find anything, I'll create a record, and I'll use the same local date now. So here I have my entire business logic here is to find the first greeting and then map it to a record if it's there. And then I return it back. So you think this will work? Nobody said anything about 17 on Jakarta EE9. So I'll redeploy it here. And before I press refresh, how many thinks this will work? Okay. 2 people. 3. So let's see what happens. It returns an empty JSON. And why is that? What did I do wrong? Oh, let's go and see. Well, records, since we're not testing it or doing anything in Jakarta EE9, records are, since I have they generate things for me. You can see the accessor method here is called date and message. And if I say that JSON-B kind of expects a Java bean, and a Java bean expects a getter. So a trick here to get it to work in Jakarta EE9 is actually to just call your variable get whatever, and then you're good to go. So this is kind of a hack that you need to do to get it to work in Jakarta EE9. Now, what happens if I move this to 10? So let's go the next step and take this on from 9 to 10, and I'll also show some core profile. Sorry. So let's go and update this POM file to Jakarta EE10. Oh, sorry. There. And then I'll drop it into Glassfish 7, which is Jakarta EE10. There you go. And there we go. So, and this one is running on 8080. So let's see what happens here. So it works here. It's just updated the POM file. But if you notice here it says get date and get message. Right? So here it actually it works with records. So in 10, I can go and fix this ugly hack I had to do in 9, and actually do it the proper way, like it's supposed to be. And it will look nicer. Right? So we can get rid of the ugly stuff. So if I wanted to take this application and use it in core profile, the first thing I would have to do is to fix the CDI extension, because core profile doesn't support the portable extensions, so I have to change it to a build compatible extension. And I know extensions aren't something that everybody is doing, so I'm just going to show the code and run it. I'm not going to do any coding here. So what I have here is a application that is using core profile. So I only have the core profile APIs available for me. The application is is very much the same as the one I had. It's a complete Duke application. It has the REST endpoint. The service is just hard coding the record. The record is exactly the same as the other one. The only thing that has changed is the extension. And if I open the extension I had in Jakarta EE 9, you see this is the way you create portable extension. You implement the Jakarta inject extension. You have a bootstrapping file called Java Enterprise Inject SPI extension, and you can observe and do things in these methods in this interface. If I do this in a build-compatible extension, I'm extending the build-compatible extension rather than the extension. So it's not the regular portable extension anymore. And the bootstrapping file is also called the same. If you can't remember what the file is supposed to be called, it's exactly the same as the fully qualified path for the interface you're implementing. And here it's a little bit more modern API. You have this enhancement phase. There are different phases in this, like the discovery, the validation, the synthesis. So depending on what you want to do and which phase you want to do it in the kind of the discovery at build time, you use these, and it's a fairly well documented API. So it's very similar, the code here and the code here, but it has a different API and a different way of bootstrapping it. But if I run it, it will run just the same, and I'll just add the core Duke to Wildfly here. Wildfly is, by the way, the compatible implementation we're using to certify core profile. And if you look at in the log file here, you can see it prints this extension messages it found. And just to be sure, it actually works. So that was a little bit of code from 10, a little bit from 8, 9, and 10. So now we're going to look at what's happening beyond Jakarta EE 10. So let's assume 10 is already here. And what comes after 10? Well, usually that's 11, and that's what we're aiming for. We are starting the work now to think about what should 11 look like. What should we think of when we are defining the specification for Jakarta EE 11? And this is speculations from my side. Don't take this for granted. And I'm not sure if we should raise the API source level or require it to 17. Maybe we should just allow it for those who want to do it. But as you see, there are some advantages to some of this stuff in 17 that could make it into the APIs, such as record support, that it's actually specified in the specification how the records should behave in JSON's binding. And in order to specify how it should behave, they have to raise the API source level. But we don't want to force everybody to go on 17 unless they have to. So it's kind of a balance there. We definitely want to test it with 17 and anything above, maybe even back at 11. But at the time Jakarta EE 11 comes out, there will probably be the next LTS will be Java SE 21. So we may want to test it on 21 at least. So we want to make sure that we follow the Java SE LTS releases as good as we can. So this is just speculation from my side. Jakarta config is something that definitely will be a part of it. It will standardize how to configure applications environment aware. So if you have an application, you set up a set of configuration and you move it into a Kubernetes or a Docker container or somewhere else, it can pick up the configuration from the environment there without having to be recompiled or reconfigured or anything. So Jakarta config is coming. So using CDI, you would typically inject a property like this. And it's very similar to what you probably know as microprofile config today. So when Jakarta config is coming out, microprofile config will probably be discontinued, and microprofile will pick up Jakarta config. Jakarta MVC is standardizing the action-based MVC controller pattern. It's a specification that has been around for a while. It's not a part of the platform. It's not necessarily going to be a part of the platform. Maybe we don't want it to be a part of the platform, but it's still there. And if, as it looks like, server-side rendering is coming back again, then maybe we are there to welcome you to use Jakarta MVC. It's a fairly simple way of creating server-side rendered applications. And it builds on Jakarta REST, so if you know REST, just basically add the controller orientation to that, and you have different ways of defining the views. In this case, with the annotation, or you can do it other ways as well. Jakarta NoSQL will standard integration with NoSQL databases. They've been working on that specification for a while, and most likely it will be a candidate for Jakarta 11. Jakarta RPC is a new specification that they're working on that will standardize gRPC within Jakarta EE. So that's as a brand new project. It started. So if you have any input on RPC or want to have any influence on how this specification should work, you should join the mailing list here and help them get this project going. We're also doing a Jakarta Commons project. This is not a new Jakarta Commons or a common utility or anything. It's just maybe this is where Jakarta annotations should come out of. So it will be just a common field for all things that are common between the specification. It's not a super dependency that everything should depend on. Jakarta Data is a brand new project proposal. It will standardize the repository pattern for data access. Think Spring data or Delta Spike data. So this will be defined in the Jakarta data specification. And to sum up, Jakarta E9 lowered the entry barriers, and you can see that by visiting our webpage and see how many new players on the market with application servers there are there, and compatible implementations of Jakarta EE APIs. It's a platform for innovation, and as you can see from Jakarta E10, there is a lot of stuff happening, and I think we've succeeded in making it a platform for innovation. And we wanted to make the migration easy from JavaX to Jakarta, and I think we have done that as well. As you see, the IDE support it, there are tools to do it, there are tutorials to do it. It's not that hard to do the migration, and most of the frameworks out there are also doing this migration, so it will be easier for you as application developers. It's here, it's coming your way. If you haven't done it already, you probably are going to have to look into this. Jakarta E10, a lot of new stuff, a lot of blue things here, which are new. So we also introduced the Jakarta E10 core profile, with brand new, smaller runtimes, allowing for native compilation with the new CDI Lite specification. Remember, even though we're saying the APIs are compiled to 11, you can use 17 or above. We're testing it for 11 and 17. If you want to find some more information about Jakarta EE, the first link here, jakarta.ee, is the only thing you have to remember for this presentation. From there, you can find everything. If you write about Jakarta EE, if you have a blog or something, you can get listed on the Jakarta blogs. It's an aggregator. It's very simple steps and instructions to get listed. So if you want to have some publicity on your blog, you can get there. You can read my blog. I do weekly updates from Jakarta EE community, and all the demo code from this application, this presentation, is on my GitHub. It's called Jakarta EE Duke, and that's where you can find it all. So with that, we have 2 minutes for questions, and thank you very much for listening.
It was amazing. Amazing to see a demo session. That's always fine. So basically, we have a few questions. One of them is kind of it came up the earliest, but it's upvoted quite a few times. So it's Jakarta EE and Spring. Are they compatible? And if not, why choose one over the other?
Okay, so Jakarta EE and Spring is kind of living in the same space. Spring depends on some of the specifications of Jakarta EE. And we rely on Spring Framework as well, so being out there. So choose one or the other. It depends on your organization, your wishes, what you want to do. If you ask me, I'd choose Jakarta EE. If you ask somebody else, you probably get a different answer. But they're comparable.
Okay, so another, I mean, it's kind of coming from your field, but it might not be your cup of tea. Any updates regarding Project Loom?
Okay, so Loom, it's not directly affecting us, but you will probably notice that if you're using Jakarta EE technologies and you're upgrading to a version of the JDK that has Loom in it, like a build of 19 with Loom, you will probably see performance improvements just by using it. You don't have to really use the APIs because that will be taken care of you by the implementations underneath.
Cool. We have a little bit more time. So can you tell us a little bit about the relationship between MicroProfile and Jakarta?
Okay, so MicroProfile relies on Jakarta EE. Jakarta EE provides the APIs that MicroProfile build upon. So MicroProfile adds a couple of APIs that are useful for creating microservices, such as health checks, some metrics and tracing, some documentation, also a little bit about security. Some of these APIs are probably going to move into Jakarta EE. Some of them are probably going to stay in MicroProfile, such as we see config is an area where there is kind of, it makes sense to have a one-way dependency. So we add config to Jakarta EE so MicroProfile can depend on it. Otherwise, we would have a circular dependencies, but depending on MicroProfile config. So we kind of want to make it a one-way dependency. So the relationship is MicroProfile adds a couple of microservices targeting APIs that are useful if you're creating microservices.
Thank you so much. Ivar is going to be here. If you have any more questions, feel free to ask. Thank you.
Thank you very much.